Welcome back to the NFL Players Association. We're going to host a press conference today with DeMaurice Smith, Executive Director of the NFLPA, Dominique Foxworth, NFLPA President, Tom DePasso, our General Counsel, and Jason Belzer, our Senior Director of Player Affairs. Welcome everyone. Again, today's an opportunity for us to engage with you guys, answer any questions you have. There's a lot of outstanding issues out there that have been talked about, and we're here, and DeMaurice Smith will kick us off. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to actually a nice Washington day. I mean, we get a bad rap sometimes about the weather, but this one's one for the books. I know that there's a number of questions on some of the recent events, but we wanted to start off talking about where we were a year ago. I checked the wires, checked your story, Mark, from a year ago, and you were reporting on how the Redskins were among other teams that were hosting practices on their own, even though we were locked out as a group of players. The owners and the players had started to meet in secret locations to do everything they could to try to get a deal done that would not only save football, but would make for an even better game for our fans, for our current players, and for our former players. And throughout that 1 year leading up to us signing that deal, we did end up with something that we believe is truly special. I paid a visit to the Ravens yesterday, an unannounced visit. That is a new component of the collective bargaining agreement where we felt that it's important for our union and our representatives of our players to have an opportunity to show up at practices to ensure that a number of the rules that we put in place to make the game safer and better for our players are actually being abided by the teams. And I'm happy to report that in the handful or nearly a half dozen visits that we've had all across the country so far, and certainly there are visits to come, what we have found is teams, for the most part, are complying with the new rules. So we have ended up with a game of football that is very good for our fans, but equally important, if not more important, we have one where we have a longer off season. We have no contact. We have limits on padded practices after a certain week. We have strict limitations on what can occur and cannot occur on the practice field, and all of those things are novel, believe it or not, even though we're in 2012. So as we go forward, we know that we have been able to achieve significant changes on the health and safety front, but even on the economic front, we ended up with a deal that we are certainly proud of. Looking back at the economics over last year, we know that 57% of the amounts were guaranteed money to players, the highest in history. Players as an overall share took 54% of all revenue, the highest in history. We have an average spend per team of $160 million per team, and all of those things come in a package where we know that we've got a greater ability to not only supervise what the teams are doing, but we've created hopefully a structure and a safer workplace for our players to work. Does it mean that we have arrived at the end-all be-all? No. That's what our union is for. We will never stand pat. We will never believe that we've reached a point where the game is as safe as it can be. Our hope is just to simply make the game safer and better the next day. So as we go forward, one of the things that we have been very proud of is the new accountability provisions of the collective bargaining agreement. And I'm happy to re-announce that 3 doctors have become a part of that program. Ross McKinney from Duke University is the first medical ethicist who has been retained to come in and look at football from the pure question of what is ethically correct with respect to our medical doctors. Dr. Johnny Benjamin is a renowned orthopedic surgeon from Florida. And last, Dr. Tony Alessi is a neurophysician who has championed the rights of athletes in the world of boxing. The reason why we chose those 3 doctors was because we created a provision in the collective bargaining agreement that for the first time requires every medical professional to comply with all federal, state, local, ethical, and professional standards. And once again, is that a great thing? Yes. Is it somewhat surreal to believe that it took until 2011 to get there? Yes. But the fact is, we slowly, and I know to some people's great consternation, we do slowly move forward to try to make this game safer and better. Everyone knows that on yesterday we filed a lawsuit alleging collusion by the NFL and its owners. Simply stated, cartels do what cartels will do when left unchecked. We were very candid in the way in which we talk to our players about how the National Football League is set up. And there are fundamental principles that must apply given the game and the business of football. And one of those fundamental principles is that we have a collective bargaining agreement, as we have had before, that obligates both parties to adhere to the rules. When we feel those rules are violated, we will, on behalf of our players, always act in their best interest. The second rule, the second paradigm that we know that we have to live in is the laws of these United States. And once again, if we believe or where we find that people involved in this business have violated the law, it is our indeed duty to represent our players, and that is what we will do. On yesterday, we filed that lawsuit. It is pending, obviously, in the state of Minnesota. It is the earliest part of that process, and I'm happy to answer a few questions. But let this be clear. We understand the importance of rules. And when those rules are violated, we understand the position that the league takes when those rules are violated with respect to players. We will also enforce the rules as they apply to owners and as they apply to the National Football League. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Mark Maskey from the Post.
Are all 32 clubs defendants in the lawsuit? And if so, what are your feelings about having the Redskins and Cowboys as defendants in a collusion lawsuit?
You know, Mark, I don't feel anything about it. We look at what the facts are as we know it. The 32 teams are defendants in the action right now. If there's evidence that is developed later on that would demonstrate that any one of those teams did not abide by the conspiracy, then my guess is those teams will make the appropriate assertions, and we'll see where we end up.
Is it your view that the evidence demonstrates those teams did not participate?
My view is that the facts that we had justified and supported the complaint that we filed. Sorry, where are you from?
AJ Perez, Fox Sports. Talk a little about the kind of acrimony that seems. We thought, this time last July, you guys said, we all thought you guys agreed to CBA. It seems like maybe a lot of things were resolved. We're back here, 8-9 months later. And if you talk a little about your relationship with Roger and.
Look, this is a great game, but as we made clear in ramping up to the lockout, it's also big business. Look, we all got along, and the league locked us out. We certainly had players across history who left every bit of blood, sweat, and tears on the field, and yet the National Football League continues to fight us in a number of workers' comp cases. The reality of this is sometimes the business of football draws all of you to a beautiful Washington day on a corner in Washington, D.C. That's the business that we're in. It doesn't have any sort of reflection or implication on friendships or anything else. This is a business. But when we believe that people work in concert to injure our players, what would you have me do?
DeMaurice, can you talk about the fundamental issue the union may have with the power that Roger Goodell has to impose penalties such as the Saints? And given how it's been historically, why did you not fight to have some of that reduced in the CBA talk?
What makes you think we didn't fight?
What happened on that note?
Well, look, every negotiation has a number of issues. If there's any doubt about our fight and our resolve, I can mail you the copy of the complaint. Every negotiation that anybody has, there are some issues that you fight over, and there's issues that you resolve. The issue of HGH is one that we continue to battle over. The issue of other changes to the drug policy is one that we continue to fight over. Those are all issues that were issues during the course of negotiation. And the way that the negotiation ended up was we made a decision about those issues that we were going to resolve and fight for, and that's what both sides do. Do I think that the league wanted to have unannounced visits by our union members showing up at their facilities? You can ask them, but I have a view of that. When we left FMCS nearly a year ago, we were presented with a deal that would have taken us down to 43% of all revenue. We weren't happy with that, so we fight over those things. So the negotiation is always going to be one where both sides give up, and hopefully both sides end up in a world that they could live with, and that's what our job is.
Sorry, Chris says, but how confident are you at the end of the day you will come out on top?
We wouldn't have filed it if we didn't think that the facts were true.
On the timing of it, for you guys,
Timing of what?
The timing of the lawsuit. This is something, collusion was something that the players have been suspicious of going all the way back to 2010 during the uncapped year. Why did the facts that you guys have collected come to light now? And what, for the timing of it being after the Redskins and Cowboys cases were settled, is that pure coincidence?
No.
No?
I'm just messing with you. Look, our job is to be vigilant and to take a look at all of the facts and make a decision about when the best time to take legal action. And I could bore you all day with the type of thoughts that go into a trial lawyer's head about when to file, what to put in the complaint. My guess is all of you would fall asleep and quickly leave. But from a lawyer's perspective, from a strategic decision about when to file, there's a myriad of facts that go into that decision. We made the decision to file yesterday.
What would you say to the owner's contention that you guys signed off in the reallocation letter, and that should basically render the lawsuit null and void?
Yeah, I guess the first thing I would ask is it doesn't sound like you're denying the existence of the collusion, now does it?
DeMaurice, to get back to HGH for a second, I know your position for a while has been that you wanted to have a population study done before you went further with that policy. The league has come out and said publicly that it's willing to give a population study. Where do you stand on that and in that particular aspect of it with the population study? And we're going to have HGH tests.
Yeah, two things. One, we offered the population study as a resolution of this back in August. And it took until much later for the league to make a decision that not only that they would do the population study, but also coming to a conclusion that it was actually necessary given the position that WADA had taken. We just recently found out, for example, that the league's choice, the league's doctor to run the population study that we had consented to, recently withdrew and said that he wasn't the right person to get this done. So I'm thrilled that the league has made a decision to move forward with the population study. I'm a little frustrated that their selection has now pulled out so that we have to, again, re-up and try to get this done. But we are here for one simple reason. The players believe in a clean game, but also players believe in a clean process. And trading a bad process to get a clean game makes no sense. So what we have done from the beginning of this discussion is to insist on a process that's fair, a process that is transparent. I'm thrilled that the league has come to accept our view about the necessity of a population study, but with the recent withdrawal of their doctor, we're going to have to move forward and ensure that the right people are involved in the right process, and that's where we stand.
So is it your understanding that when that person is found, there will be a population study, and then after that there will be testing?
Our position is that the population study is one issue as it relates to HGH. Are there other outstanding issues with respect to the overall drug policy that we would like to see? Absolutely. Baseball just went through a horrific situation with one of their players who was accused, and it was a neutral arbitrator who came to the conclusion that the very process that the parties had agreed to follow had not been followed. So do we believe that having an independent arbitrator to review that process is important? Yes. Do we believe that other changes to the drug system are important to improve it and to make it more fair and more transparent? Absolutely. So on the issue of HGH, are there issues that we need to work out? Sure. But to say, is that the only issue left? No.
Dee, we know your role, Tom's role, Fox's role. What's Jason Belzer's role with all of this going forward?
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Jason Belzer. There's probably no one in the organization that I would refer to as my right hand than Jason. Jason has a long-term career in the National Football League, but I would say even more importantly, he has had a long career of ensuring that, one, that our union stays player-focused, and two, that we are unconditionally committed to the betterment of our players. Jason Belzer.
Thank you. To answer that question, Adam, one of the things that our group is charged with, we're charged with making sure the players understand the business of football. That's been an edict of D since he was elected as executive director. Our staff includes Tom Carter, Don Davis, Ernie Conwell, and Scott Turner. We make sure that the players understand the CBA. We make sure that when it goes out that we are able to work with D and his legal team to enforce the CBA. And most important, we always want to have the strongest sports union that there is in sports, and we believe we have that.
For you, dealing with the player safety issue too, I'd assume that there's some sort of, this can be for you too, but there's some sort of push and pull between wanting to serve the players who are accused here with the Saints and wanting to protect all the other players who are alleged to have been targets. What would your standpoint be on? What would your view be on that? And do you too?
My viewpoint on that is that I don't think there's any player in the National Football League, when he puts on his pads on a Sunday or a Thursday, intentionally goes out to harm another player. I just have a fundamental principle that that is the case. In 11 years in the NFL, I've never seen a player intentionally go out and try and harm another player, end his career, jeopardize his family's livelihood. I just don't think it happens. Do I believe there's situations in the course of a game and for that ultimate quest to win a Super Bowl that players play harder, faster, tougher? Without a doubt. We've witnessed that. But without a doubt, I don't think there's a player that goes out and intentionally tries to hurt a player in his career, even if that is ending up winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and Albert, look, we represent both players. And for the men and the women who work in this organization, for the families that we represent, we frankly resent, any sort of implication that we can only represent one side in this. I was extremely disappointed, for example, to see an agent write into us and say, isn't it a conflict of interest for the players' union to represent these 4 players who were alleged to have violated the rules? And I'm extremely disappointed that an agent would say that, because I would expect a little bit more from someone who wants to represent our players. Will I have a conversation with that agent? Absolutely. The simple fact is this. One, there's been an allegation that these players have done something wrong, and as you guys know, we've made it abundantly clear that we have not seen one piece of evidence that would show that one of those players got paid to target a player and injure him and get him out of a game. If that is indeed the case, we represent the players who would have been targeted. And how in the world are we, as a representative of those players, how could we possibly sit down with the mothers and the kids that we talk to in order to prepare them for this lockout and tell them that they don't have a voice because we're only representing one side in this? It's an anathema. What we have believed that is right in this process is, if there is evidence indeed that these players intentionally targeted someone for money, we have as much interest, if not more, in all of those facts in the National Football League. What we have insisted on is a process that provides the players with a chance to confront the proof, and where the National Football League would treat them as men and as partners. That's what we will insist on.
Another player safety issue.
Where do you guys stand as an organization on Jonathan Goldman's lawsuit against Roger Goodell?
We understand that it was filed, I believe, in Louisiana. We've certainly been in touch with all of the representatives who represent players. After that, that's about it.
The owners passing the pad rule this week, any reaction from your players, and how are you going to go about it?
Yeah, I mean, we have had reaction from the players. I also saw the quote from the Nike executive. Look, we have had a long discussion about this issue with the league for years. One of the league's representatives, Mr. York, was very involved in this discussion, and ironically, he took a position that's now inconsistent with the one that the league has taken. It's what we believe in is to engage in a disciplined process that improves player safety. And I understand the position that the league took and announced the other day on hip pads and thigh pads. It does seem somewhat ironic to me that there's been discussions about hip pads and thigh pads, and I frankly don't remember one conversation about how we can develop a better mouthpiece or whether we should have uniform helmet standards in the National Football League. If the league wants to focus on hip pads and thigh pads right now, I think I understand why.
So when you said there hadn't been a conversation about mouthpieces and helmets, did you attempt to have that conversation with the league?
No, my only point is this. On a day where they want to talk about hip pads and thigh pads, I'm well aware of the discussions that we haven't had.
Why haven't you had those discussions?
You ask them.
Have you not raised that issue, though?
Of course we have. I mean, look, Jarrett, when isn't a day where we haven't talked about player health and safety? I mean, when I got this job, the head of the NFL's concussion committee was a rheumatologist. It was the players' union who took the issue of helmets and concussions to Capitol Hill. It was the players' union who built upon the discussions from GQ when they had the article about Dr. Amalu's studies that asked hard questions. Why did the National Football League seek to prevent Dr. Amalu's study from being published? It's the players' union who urged the teams to decrease two-a-day practices and to decrease helmet-to-helmet concussions, because we now know that it's not really the big hits that cause problems with players. It's exposing them to repetitive conduct that results in either head-to-head or head-to-ground contact. So I'm proud of our players' union that while we have certainly done things to improve the pensions, like the Legacy Fund, that we have done those things to change the manner in which football has been done. I'm proud of our union where we have stood up to make a stand. I know that every now and then when the league announces something like hip pads and thigh pads, everybody just wants to talk about hip pads and thigh pads. But the fact is, we have committed ourselves to changing the conversation since 2009. And changing that conversation not only includes one-off issues like hip pads and thigh pads. What we have tried to do was confront the National Football League with one simple thought change, that a game can be profitable and fun, but a game can also be safer. And as long as we have those kind of discussions that actually improve the health and safety of our players and make their lives better after they leave this game, that's what we do.
David Fucillo, SB Nation. On that note, several players have suggested more end-of-career count. Are the NFLPA and the league doing anything about that? Or?
I'll tell you what we're doing. One, you met Jason Belzer, but there's a team of people who work in this building who are committed to just that. Last year, at the height of preparing for the lockout and working our way through a new CBA, we restructured our office in a way where we tore down the walls between the people who dealt with rookies, the people who dealt with current players, and the people who dealt with former players. And we adopted a new model that will hopefully have our players union touching our young men as they transition into football, while they're in football, and then to a world where they transition out. But let me be clear. While we will change the way in which we operate, why we have thought about ways to use the new funds under the CBA for former players, and while we are working with a number of outside groups to improve the way in which we interact with them to prepare young men for their lives, after football, our most important contribution to that effort is where we started. In front of every locker room, we have the same opening. We want our men to be businessmen in the business of football. We tell them that no player fits into the long-term business plans of an owner. Owners will own teams for decades. You will play for an average of 3.5 years. We tell them that every person in the National Football League will be injured. And we tell them that it is their responsibility to themselves and to their families to think about the end of their career while they're playing their career. And that is critically important because we do have resources. But until our young men, until all of them embrace the fleeting nature of their career and the importance and the obligation that they have to their family, when they do that, we stand a chance of making a change. And everybody in this organization now knows because that's what I told them 2 years ago. Down the road, I want our organization not only be measured about what type of CBA we have or whether the game is better and healthier. I expect our organization to be measured by how good of a job we do aiding the transition to a life where, on balance, they're going to be a non-football player a heck of a lot longer than they're going to be a football player.
On that note,
We've got time for 2 more questions. Anything for Dominique?
Well, on that note, D or Dominique, what you were just talking about, what kind of impact did you say on suicide have on the way you guys do business, the way that anything at all?
Yeah.
Within the wall?
You know, and we don't look at look. Junior's suicide was tragic for the players like Drew Brees on the executive committee who played with him, knew him as a friend. Your first thought isn't so much how does this impact the office. Your first thought is those players lost a great friend. But whether it was Junior's suicide or the untimely death of any one of our former players, we look at those things as what can we learn, not only from the issue of whether they've donated their brain to any sort of future studies, but as an organization, we try to find out what can we learn in order to make sure that this doesn't happen. And to be blunt, one of the things, whether it was a head trauma issue in his case or whether it was early onset of dementia in other players, early onset of ALS, we look at all of those things the same. How do we prevent players from being in a position where they suffer from those ailments? And our first line of defense has to be to change the way in which the game is played and practiced. So when we made those recommendations, when we insisted on those changes in the CBA, we made those changes thinking about the John Mackeys of the world. Because we now know that the wear tear of football, does it leave a player in some cases broken and twisted? Yes. And for the same reasons, do we keep a close eye on the concussion cases? Yes, we do.
You mentioned John Mackey, and I know Sylvia Mackey has been leading a charge to get the survivor benefits for the legacy fund. The league has said it would pay the 51%.
Did you ask the league where their 51% came from?
I did not ask.
Come on, that's a good reporter question.
Okay, what about your 49%?
Well, let's ask him about their 51%. Because look, here's the reality. We are more than willing to support the families of our union members, but and that's what we have done. But when the league makes a decision that it's going to pay its 51%, and we don't know where the fine money has gone for the last few years, that's a legitimate question not only for me but every good journalist. And when we make requests upon the league about where their 51% comes from, and we think that their 51% may come from player fine money, that would mean that if the 51% that they're paying comes from player fine money and our 49% comes from player fine money, who's not paying any amount?
So the player fine money does not go to charity?
No. What I have said is something a little more simple. We went into funding the legacy fund with one simple request from the owners. The teams that you enjoy and the franchise values that they have are inextricably tied to the players who came before you. And while the legacy fund of over $600 million is significant, we made it abundantly clear to all of you that this was the first time in history that any team had ever contributed to the pension funds of former players. So when it comes to the issue of taking care of the families, obviously, for the men who signed John Mackey's jersey on the day that they signed the new CBA, there isn't one of those men who doesn't believe and appreciate the sacrifice of people like him. We're never going to forget him. But will we do whatever we can to make sure that the league, its team owners, and those teams make their fair contribution to the families who built this game? Every day. I'm going to do that every day. So I know that there are people out there who are frustrated about the pace of this, but until we are absolutely sure that the National Football League and their teams and their owners are going to pay those amounts out of league money, we're going to continue to fight for what's right.
Thanks,
One
everybody.
more question. The salary cap is just over $120 million this year. The secret, quote unquote, salary cap is like alleged to be $123 million. That does not seem to be a great advance. Can you break it down in layman's terms?
I thought I just did at the beginning. $160 million average per team. 160. 57% of the money was guaranteed. That's the highest in history. And players overall took 54% of all revenue. Which one of those don't you think's in advance?
No, that's real dollars when you talk about cash spent.
Right.
So like I said, with the cap being
Who cares what the...
flat.
Hey, look, if you think about the obsession over the cap for every year up until we signed our new deal, and you know I like to have fun with y'all. Everybody talks about the cap, everybody talks about the cap, everybody talked about the cap. What didn't people talk about?
Cash spending?
The spend. The spend. So where we are today is we are in the second year where there is a 99% spend of all of the money that goes to players. For every year that comes after this, there is a 95% spend. So we are in a world where no team can ever truly be a bottom dweller anymore. No team can decide, like former teams, that you could have a cap in the hundreds and actually spend in the 70s. So what the players of the National Football League have done is insisted on an economic stream that guarantees that the money will be spent on players. We address the rookie situation by pulling that money out of rookie compensation and putting it into the locker room of current players. But most importantly, or equally importantly, the players of the National Football League ended up with an economic structure that guarantees for the next team years, what? Parity. Parity. So every fan sitting in every stand, every one of those fans who knew for years that their team was never going to spend, every one of those people who buy a ticket every day can now rest assured that for the next 10 years, even their team is going to have to spend at least 95% of the cap. And at the end of the day, Jarrett, I honestly believe that that is going to keep our game better. That's going to make our game more competitive. Will it put more money in our players' pockets? Yes. But at the end of the day, I know that the economic structure that we have today is much better than the declining revenues and shares of revenues that we had before. And on top of all of that, our players and everyone who comes after it. For a guy like Tom Carter, whose son is just beginning his college career, that is a man right now who played in the National Football League who knows that if his son comes to this league, he will play in a game that is safer and better. And for that, that's a good day at the office for the NFL Players Association. Thank you all.
Everybody.